Chapter 6 Kids at Camp David. Princess Asami and I really enjoyed the time we spent together in the White House, and both sets of parents noticed. My dad, and hers, had a long telephone call a couple of days after the state dinner. I didn't find out what they discussed until I was much older, but I do remember the conversation I had with my parents afterward. They came out to my room and sat on the bed in a way that made me think I'd somehow gotten into trouble. "Whatever it is, Agent Walsh started it," I blurted out before they could get a word in. My dad couldn't help but laugh. "Actually," he said, "I'm a little frustrated that Walsh put a stop to it." "So, Blake, what did you think of that girl you met at the state dinner, Princess Asami?" "She's all right," I said with a shrug. "Did you enjoy hanging out with her?" My mom's tone of voice was a little less subtle. Yeah. The answer was truthful, but I was scared of how my parents would react. "The prince, her father, called us yesterday," the president said. "He said Princess Asami wouldn't stop talking about you on the flight back to Japan. She seems quite smitten." Back then, I didn't know what the word smitten meant. Believe it or not, Asami was the one who enlightened me on that front. I just gave my dad a nervous smile. "So, would you be interested in seeing her again?" My mom asked in a tone of voice that suggested she wanted me to say yes. "Sure," I said without thinking. Now, at the time, I honestly thought my parents were just happy that I made a friend, and they were trying to encourage me to maintain that friendship. But after World War III came to an end, and my dad left the presidency, I learned the truth. Both my father and the Japanese Prime Minister knew that Asami and I liked one another, and they saw a chance to spin a propaganda campaign around us. The US-Japanese alliance wasn't universally popular. There were people in both countries who opposed the idea, and the leaders of both nations made the decision to use Asami and I as the poster children of the new alliance. We were unwitting mascots. Each set of parents encouraged their child to pursue the other as a possible future romantic partner, then intentionally leaked small details to the press. I don't think I need to emphasize how angry Asami and I were when we found out we were being used. But by the time we found out, so much had changed and we'd become far different people than who we started out as. The chief of staff got me my own laptop computer so that I could have a long-distance relationship with Asami. We used an online chat service to talk with one another, and a simple webcam allowed us to record and send short videos to each other. I quickly got to the point where I looked forward to those virtual talks every day. By the time my birthday rolled around in June, my sister was already teasing me about being married to a computer screen. I don't falter. I was actually having a lot of fun chatting with the princess, and after a few long-distance chats, we found a few common interests. The princess was an outdoorsy type of person. She told me that although she'd spent most of her life in Tokyo, she was born in a town called Kyoto and spent most of her early years there. "Kyoto's in a valley, wedged between some beautiful mountains and the Great Lake Biwa," she told me. "I've loved going for long walks in the forests outside of town." Of course, I'm a Michigander. As soon as the princess applied the word great to Lake Biwa, I engaged her in a long but friendly debate over what constitutes a Great Lake. We eventually agreed to Biwa getting to be Japan's only Great Lake. On my birthday, at the end of June, I promised Asami to give her a tour of Detroit, my hometown, when we were older. She offered to give me a tour of Tokyo. Another thing I learned about Asami was that she was hyperactive. I've met plenty of hyper kids in school, so I was pretty used to it. Asami seemed unable to hold still. She had to pace around the room or go for long walks whenever she was on the phone with me. Whenever she got excited, she would talk very fast, to the point where her words seemed to blend into each other. Most people would have been annoyed by Asami's high-speed, bouncing-off-the-walls kind of energy. I thought it made her kind of cute. The princess was a bit of a troublemaker, like me. She had what she called a sense of justice. Asami once saw a group of bullies at school shaking down another kid for their money. Instead of calling for help, getting a teacher, or one of her own personal bodyguards, the imperial family does have those. Asami picked up a heavy book and proceeded to strike the bullies over the head with it. She was suspended from school for fighting, and when ordered to apologize for attacking the bullies, Asami refused to do so, point blank. They were in the wrong, she said, not her. "Oh, I believe you," I responded to this story. I could sense Asami blushing through the phone. Asami was still a kid, just like me, which meant she enjoyed watching TV. After a few weeks, I finally persuaded her to watch my favorite show, Star Trek. In a stroke of good luck, Asami fell in love with the show after watching just a few episodes. We chat about the show all the time and fantasize together about what we would name our own spaceship if we ever lived long enough to get one. And no, the names Avenger, Archangel, and Niagara never came up. It was around that time when I started to see the first signs that my parents had an ulterior motive. Asami sent me an email with a video attachment in July. 2 celebrity gossip reporters in Japan were arrested for trying to bribe officials into giving them details about her relationship with me. A few days later, an American TV show blew the lid off the whole thing. Some sensationalist tabloid claimed to have a source in the White House and proceeded to run a half-hour-long special in which they tried to guess how far I'd gotten with Asami. I feel the need to remind the reader that Asami and I were both preteens at the time, and that we hardly ever saw one another in person. We thought that holding hands was the biggest possible deal back then. For non-human readers, we were roughly the equivalent of immature Vannian fledglings or adolescent Lavakian cubs. We were simply too young to approach a romance in the way adults do. Yet, for some reason, a lot of people thought we were doing just that. Eventually, things got crazy. Opinion page of the Washington Post, July 21st, 2005. Blake Robinson and the Modern-Day Political Marriage by Pete Guerra. Of the many places in the world where one might go for a date or a honeymoon, I'm sure the nation's capital ranks very low on many couples' list of chosen destinations. Yet in the hallowed halls of the presidential mansion, an unexpected relationship has formed. Blake Robinson, eldest son of our nation's 6th president, has been keeping in close contact with the princess of a far eastern nation ever since the state dinner of May 13th. Sources in the White House say the teenager is sequestering himself in hidden rooms to film videos of himself to send to Princess Asami of Chiako, who seems to be responding with similar videos filmed in equal secrecy. People reacted to the discovery of this long-distance relationship in a wide range of ways. Some see it as harmless puppy love between children. Others have seen fit to rekindle the old Loving versus Virginia debate about interracial relations. Yet this writer is alarmed that no one seems to have considered the possible political ramifications of the son of America's leader dating the relative of a foreign head of state. Allow me to expound. Even before the time of Helen of Troy, women have been seen as political bargaining chips. The political marriage was the most powerful tool in a ruler's arsenal besides his army. Men of power would trade away their daughters and sisters in return for money, land, or sometimes even an alliance. Love and the happiness of the wedded couple were often afterthoughts. When these affairs go wrong, it could lead to disruptions and conflict. Once again, I refer to Helen. I'm confident that our first son is not thinking of the historical precedent as he hides in an empty room with a cell phone, doing exactly what we expect a teenage boy in this situation to do. But I assure you, his father is thinking of this. The Prime Minister of Japan is thinking of this. And there is no doubt in my mind that our enemies in the Kremlin have also thought of this. The fledgling alliance between America and Japan has just received a shot in the arm, and the Russians know it. The world we live in has come a long way since the likes of Homer and Shakespeare. It is no longer necessary for some elaborate wedding ceremony to unite two countries. We're seeing it play out on our televisions and on the internet. The American people and their counterparts in the East are glued to their screens, thirsty for any new information about an otherwise wholly unlikely romance. People are invested in the story, in much the same way they'd be invested in a good book or TV series. What does this mean? It means that those people will be less willing to accept any kind of outcome that involves splitting up the young couple. Sure, there will be those who are not interested and tune out, but those who remain will have committed themselves. That measurable section of the US and Japanese populace who cares for the well-being and future of this young couple will be the ones who beat the drums of war when Soviet soldiers finally set foot on the Japanese home islands. An event that seems more and more probable with each passing day of provocations. When I found this article on Dad's table during breakfast that morning, I skimmed through it, and being just 12 years old, I only understood about half of it. So I held up the paper to my dad and asked, "So what does this mean?" Looking frustrated, my dad crumpled the paper into a ball and tossed it in a trash can. "They're being real coy about it, but they're basically accusing us of doing something bad," he said. "When you're older, you'll understand perfectly. But for now, we'll just have to weather the storm this is going to bring down on us." And he was right. There was a storm of attention. Once Guerra's article hit the presses, all eyes in the nation were suddenly on the first family. Princess Asami got a similar treatment in Japan, although it was nowhere near as intense for her. In her country, there was a very strong taboo against prying into the personal affairs of the imperial family. Asami had a shield. Jackie and I were fully exposed. The trips to and from school became hell. Dozens of journalists, both from reputable agencies and tabloids alike, were trying their absolute hardest to get near my sister and I for any kind of comment. Walking across the school lawn, paparazzi snapped photos of us and shouted questions about Asami. Andy and Chelsea were the best friends we could have asked for at the time. They stood by us each morning. Oftentimes, Andy would apologize for what his dad started. Jackie would forgive him each time, if only because she was the best sibling I'll ever have in my life. Classes themselves became an issue too. Every teacher and counselor in the school thought it was their God-given purpose to give me sage advice on how to maintain a long-distance relationship. I never asked anyone for advice, and after a couple days of that madness, I started trying to avoid these encounters wherever possible. Chatting with Asami was fun for me, and these people were ruining that fun, as far as I was concerned. It was only when I was much, much older that I figured out exactly what was going on. I remember one particular morning that I complained to Dad about how these people were constantly bugging me about Princess Asami. He said he understood, and he would try to do something about it. He lied to my face. He might have said that he wanted to help me, but my dad never did anything of the kind. By the fall of 2005, a low-intensity propaganda campaign was gaining traction in America, with myself and Princess Asami at its core. White House employees were regularly leaking updates about me to the press. If I mailed a present to Japan for Asami, the entire world knew what was in the box before it arrived in Tokyo. If Asami shared one of her poems with me, literary analysts were picking it apart on CNN before I'd finished reading it. And the American people were lapping it up. Just like Pete predicted, a sizable number of people were invested in my love life like it was a soap opera. And somehow, in the middle of this tabloid hurricane, politicians were plowing a path towards solidifying the U.S.-Japanese alliance, which was exactly what my dad wanted. When the press got a hold of a recorded phone call in which I joked about which of our friends would win in a fight, congressional leaders used it as a springboard to start a debate about increasing military spending. By Halloween, the U.S. Army was rapidly increasing in size, and a large mountain of new, high-tech weapons and equipment had been purchased for it. When Asami told me about how she was worried about a future Soviet invasion, a fear-mongering campaign unlike any other commenced on major news networks, bringing more and more Americans and Japanese into the "we must fight the Soviets now" camp. The very first winter I spent in the White House was, at the time, a moment of joy for me. But now as an adult, I can see my dad undermined this too. In December of 2005, I was getting very upset with how frequently my communications with Asami were being intercepted by journalists. We were not the star-crossed lovebirds the media made us out to be, but rather two friends brought closer together by the sole desire to talk in private. And when two kids really want to get away from grown-ups, they'll be willing to try some crazy things. Asami and I sure did. As I said before, the two of us were fans of Star Trek. Sometime around Christmas, I was watching an old Star Trek movie from the 1980s, and it had a clever scene in which the hero and his best friend had to talk to one another in code because they knew an enemy was listening. Needless to say, we tried it right away. Asami and I thought we were the cleverest children in the world by using coded phrases to send messages via email. Blake Robinson. Dog, icky dog, yes, oval, unicorn, soup, equal, nope, equal, word, equal, power, icky, soup, oval, dog, equal, question mark. Princess Asami. Yes, equal, soup, circle, apple, power, triple, apple, icky, nope, apple, rainbow, circle, hairy, equal, rainbow, rainbow, oval, circle, canto, soup, exclamation. Blake Robinson. Nope, equal, dog, soup, oval, fail, map, apple, nope, yes, period. Princess Asami. Banana, icky, goofball, equal, rainbow, nope, golf, equal, dog, soup, oval, fail, equal, word, period. Blake Robinson. Lima, icky, vegetable, equal, lima, oval, nope, goofball, power, rainbow, oval, soup, power, equal, rainbow, period. To be completely fair, we both thought this deception was working because, as December dragged on, the news ran fewer and fewer stories about us. Asami and I celebrated for a whole weekend because we really thought we won. I'm pretty sure that moment of shared joy was the first time one of us said anything resembling "I love you," when the princess emailed me the coded message, Lima Veggie Unicorn. LVU. As far as I'm concerned, it counts. Of course, the only people we deceived were ourselves. An intern at the Pentagon cracked our code in less than 2 hours, and my dad was able to read our emails each night. He just gave us a break. According to records preserved from his administration, someone told Dad that it was unlikely for the Soviets to attack during the winter, so he eased off the propaganda campaign, which in turn gave the princess and I room to relax. He would have started up again in the spring, but my reprieve was extended into the next year. For reasons I wouldn't discover until my daughter's friend, Chris Wright, dug up the answer from a pile of moldy paperwork. 2006 started with a bang. Literally. We woke up on New Year's Day to see every news station running the same story. There was a skirmish between the Japanese and the Soviets during the night. A Soviet cruiser had tried to sail through the disputed Kuril Islands in northern Japan, and a squadron of Japanese fighter planes opened fire on the ship. The Soviet vessel returned fire, downing one of the planes. 14 Russians were dead. 1 Japanese pilot was also killed. And both countries were on the brink of hauling off and blowing each other to hell. My dad spent his New Year in the White House war room, arguing with his generals and giving the leaders of Japan and Russia angry phone calls. Jackie and I both called Princess Asami on the phone. She made it clear, in no uncertain terms, that she was very frightened. She thought the war had already started. Lucky for her, cooler heads prevailed, and a very tense status quo fell over East Asia. January 9th, 2006. Sidwell Friends School, District of Columbia. At school, the heightened tension left everyone feeling high-strung and ready to pounce. The first people who actually did so were, predictably, the journalists. In hindsight, I think they were just desperate for an old familiar news story to take people's minds off the fact that we just narrowly avoided a big war in Asia. So they pestered Jackie and I more than usual on our way through the snow towards the front door. Andy and Chelsea were waiting for us like usual. Andy was bundled up like a blizzard was coming, even though there was only a dusting of snow on the ground. Chelsea, on the other hand, was struggling to walk in the super expensive designer shoes she was wearing that day. Andy and Jackie both slipped inside the school and vanished from sight. I was feeling a little sorry for Chelsea, so I waited and held the door open for her. Big mistake. A tabloid photographer pointed his camera at me and screamed, "Wait a minute! That's Senator Daniels' daughter! Blake's holding the door for her!" The sound of cameras clicking blended into one another and harmonized with the drone of the reporters' voices. "Miss Daniels, how long have you known the president's son? Blake, does your father know about this? Have you broken up with the Princess of Japan, Blake? Miss Daniels, how will this affect your modeling work? Blake, what does Miss Daniels have that the princess lacked?" As soon as she got inside the school, Chelsea slammed the door so hard that a glass pane broke, letting snow into the hallway. The four of us huddled together and finally reached our breaking point. Chelsea broke down crying while Andy, Jackie, and I tried to comfort her. "This is horrible," Chelsea wept. "First front page of my life, and it's gonna be my ugly face. What agency's gonna hire me now?" In the back of my mind, I wondered if there were any modeling agencies on Earth willing to hire a 12-year-old. Jackie said, "Screw 'em all. My brother and I will start our own company and hire you. Right, Blake?" Andy actually managed to laugh. "Girls of the White House," he declared. "We'll get you, Jackie, the princess and her sister, and maybe the first lady, too. You'll be the coolest women in D.C. That kinda cheered Chelsea up. She stopped crying anyway. But what really lifted our spirits was something we saw around lunchtime. Out the window, we spotted about 50 soldiers. They were carrying snow shovels, and in 10 minutes, they cleared all of the snow off the school lawn. Then, a big helicopter came down to a noisy landing in front of the school. Snow blasted everywhere as the big helicopter blades sliced the air at high speed. The words, "United States of America," were painted on the side in green. "It's Marine One!" I gasped. "Dad's here!" A moment later, the school principal's voice spoke over the intercom. "Will the following students please report to the front entrance? Blake Robinson, Jacqueline Robinson, Andy Guerra, and Chelsea Daniels. Thank you." We left the cafeteria at a run before the announcement finished. There were 2 people waiting for us in Marine One, my dad and Secret Service Agent Walsh. As soon as the 4 of us clambered inside the cabin, Walsh closed the door and signaled the pilot to take off. The presidential helicopter seemed to just leap off the ground and took to the sky with ease. "Walsh told me what happened this morning," my dad explained. "I'm talking to the White House press corps about restricting access to you kids. But in the meantime, I'd like you children to go somewhere quiet." "There's no such thing as a quiet place in D.C., I protested. "You're right, son," Dad replied with a smile. "Pilot, call Thermont and let them know we're dropping off 4 kids. "Thermont?" Andy repeated. "What the hell is Thermont?" January 9th, 2006. Camp David, Maryland. As soon as Chelsea realized where we were, she began to squeal with excitement. Camp David! Chelsea's voice went so high I had to cover my ears. You guys, it's the presidential retreat! The what? Jackie said, confused. On his side of the helicopter, my dad was looking very happy. This is the official vacation home of the president and his family, my dad said. When America's leaders need to get away from it all, this is where they go. Mr. Guerra, Miss Daniels, if you're willing to stay here and keep your friends company, I'll speak to your parents and clear everything up with them right away. Yes, all four of us said together. Yes, please. Chelsea peered out of the window and started pointing out the places of interest below us. Hey, Jax, that's the equestrian trail. We can go horseback riding. There's the main lodge where we can have guests over for parties. Oh, Mr. President, can Jackie and I host a party? Sure, Dad replied. Blake, is it okay if I invite the children of Prince Ryobe? I'm sure Her Highness Asami is more than ready to see you again. I'm pretty sure I leapt out of my seat at the opportunity to see Asami. Marine One landed not too far away from one of the main cabins. We had to walk the rest of the way to it. Not that we minded, there was so much to see. Camp David was located deep in the forests of the Katoken Mountains, with no sign of civilization in any direction. Just trees and mountaintops. Andy and I looked around, admiring the wondrous beauty of the Appalachian terrain surrounding us. Jackie and Chelsea were eagerly talking about stylish winter clothes and which first lady they would try to emulate. I'm thinking about that red sweater Jackie Kennedy wore, Chelsea was saying, and how she always had her hair up like... What's that? Chelsea stopped in her tracks and pointed to a large, flat space covered in snow and ice. Oh, that's the swimming pool. Dad waved his hand casually. It's covered up now, but if you ask someone, they'll turn the heater on and you can use it later tonight. It's a heated pool? Chelsea gasped and then started fanning herself. Okay, Blake, Jackie, Andy, like, one of you needs to marry me and then get elected president. I just want to spend 4 years here. This place is paradise. Paradise was exactly what the doctor would have ordered in our case. Freed from the stresses of the news cycle, the four of us had the whole day and all of Camp David to ourselves once we finished our homework, which was sent from the school via helicopter. Andy sent a message home asking not only for clothes, but for a video game console as well. He and I spent hours together each day blowing up space aliens while joking about how an extraterrestrial attack on Earth would never happen in real life. And besides, Andy said, the galaxy is so big that no aliens would ever get here in our lifetime. Meanwhile, Chelsea called her father, the senator, and asked him to send all of her swimsuits to Camp David, prompting Senator Daniels' predictable response. But, darling, it's the middle of winter. To which Chelsea replied, heated pool. Chelsea's swimwear was shipped via first-class mail and hand-carried to our cabin by a U.S. Navy officer. Princess Asami and her siblings arrived about a week later. They were all born and raised in a mountainous country, so they felt very comfortable in Camp David's environment. As soon as she arrived in the cabin, Asami's older sister finally followed through on something she said she wanted to do the first time we met. Oh, this is more like it, Princess Akeno sighed. She kicked off her shoes, threw herself down on the nearest couch, and fell into a state of relaxation that strongly reminded me of a sleepy kitten. Prince Akio was fascinated by the fact that there were so many soldiers guarding the place. You know what's even stranger? I said. This whole place is under the control of the Navy. Wait, what? Akio said. But I thought we were in the mountains. Is the sea that close by? Nope, Andy confirmed. Chesapeake is about 60 miles from here. This only piqued Akio's curiosity even more. He went outside to interview some of the soldiers around the place. Princess Asami also went outside, but she just wanted to go exploring. I had a hunch she would have spent all day wandering around the forest trails if she could help it, so I went along with her, if only to convince her to cut the journey short before the sun went down. The princess and I spent the next couple of weeks out on the trails, watching as winter held the forest and mountains in its cold grip. Trudging through the snow and ice, all bundled up and carrying a thermos of hot apple cider, we felt like we were on an adventure together. An aimless one with no goal, but an adventure nonetheless. We talked at length about the hellish year we'd been through. Asami and I congratulated ourselves on the code we thought was working so well. She confided in me about her encounter with a group of xenophobes who thought she was doing Japan a disservice by dating a foreigner. We both laughed at the thought that we were dating. "Come on," Asami said. "You're the kind of friend I know is going to pick up the phone if I call. That makes you, like, my special best friend." "Aw, thanks," I replied. "Am I your only one of those?" "You sure are," Asami said. "Promise." "I believe you," I said, "and you're my only special best friend, too." Yeah, this is about as close to dating as two children can get. And the two of us were pretty far beyond that metaphorical line in the sand, even if we refused to admit it then. I wish I could say this was all my dad's machinations, but it wasn't. The events that occurred next would have made it into this book no matter what. They were too important. But thanks to Wright and Igarashi, we now know the full context behind said events. When Akira Robinson's time ship, the Archangel, was seized in 2035, we acquired a partial database of her time travel activities. One of the most curious bits of information we found was her timing log. Apparently, the Paradox thought the timing of certain events to be more important than whether or not they actually occurred. She would shift these crucial events forwards or backwards on the timeline in hopes that the outcome of the war in heaven would be shifted in a direction she favored. The event I'm about to discuss is one such moment. It originally occurred in the summertime, yet for reasons beyond me, Akira changed the timing, causing this event to occur in the winter instead. My family, who assisted me in the research for this book, have their own theories, but this is a topic for another time. What is important is that at some point during the month of December, Akira infiltrated one observatory circle, the official home of the vice president, and tampered with Vice President McDonald's schedule. Specifically, she created a schedule conflict and caused it to go unnoticed until it was far, far too late. Vice President McDonald now had a business appointment at Camp David, and he did not know I was already there with my sister and friends. February 14th, 2006. Valentine's Day got off to a very cold start for the kids at Camp David. For non-human readers who may not know, Valentine's Day was once a religious holiday here on Earth, but it has since evolved into a global celebration of romance and love. For some children, like Chelsea, Valentine's Day is the golden opportunity to win a popularity contest once and for all. But for the rest of us, it's a chance to tell our friends how much we appreciate them, usually by giving gifts of brightly colored candy. When that year's Valentine's Day came around, Asami and I were very slowly starting to accept that there might be a romantic aspect to our special best friendship. We'd acknowledged it enough that we'd planned to spend our holiday watching movies in the Hickory Lodge by ourselves. That place had a projector, and it was already so dark and cozy that it was like a mini movie theater. Asami and I went back and forth all morning. We'd watch an American movie, then a Japanese one, then repeat. Asami tried to explain the Japanese films to me, but she was too busy giggling at my confusion to utter a full sentence. I returned the favor during the American shows. We both enjoyed watching Star Trek films, though. Epic spaceship battles, scary aliens, laser guns, and cool gadgets. These movies had everything we could ever want. In the middle of the afternoon, we were watching a Star Trek movie. During a scene when a spaceship crashed into a planet, the movie was making so much noise that we didn't hear the door open or close behind us. We did, however, hear the sounds of two people talking as soon as the movie got to a quiet scene again. Asami and I had no idea if we were breaking some kind of rule. We thought Secret Service Agent Walsh was here to bust us or something. Lucky for us, the room was dark, since the only source of light was the movie projector. The two of us huddled together underneath a single blanket and held really still. To this day, I can still remember the feeling of Asami's chest pressing into mine, her frantic heartbeat reverberating through my bones. Two men sat down on the couch positioned just behind the love seat Asami and I were hidden in. They never saw us. They never even knew we were there. They just started talking. "Leave it on," said the voice of Vice President Trevor McDonald. "We've got an alibi now." "I've never been to Camp David," said an unknown male voice. "Just the novelty alone is an alibi. Now let's talk business." "You already know what I want." The Vice President sounded very stern. "And I've said it before," replied the stranger. "The Republicans won't go for it. Ask the Democrats." "The Democrats have already agreed to give me the votes," Vice President McDonald said. "That gives me 45 in favor. I just need 5 more. Surely you can get 5 Republicans to break from their party line just once." "This is no ordinary just once, Mr. Vice President." Now the stranger seemed terse. "We're talking about the War Powers Resolution here. You're asking for the Tonkin Gulf." "And you'll give me Tonkin Gulf," said the Vice President, "or else the bill your employer likes so much will fail to pass the Senate." A pause. After a few moments, the stranger spoke up. "What if I get you something else?" he asked. "Something off menu. Add that on top of what I've already offered." Another pause. "Don't go too far off menu," the Vice President said. "My usual ask. That'll be sufficient. Get me the usual, plus those votes." "I think, Mr. Vice President, my employer will agree to that deal," the stranger finished. "It is a favorable one to all involved. Dinner at the usual place." And then they were silent for the next 45 minutes. They were watching the movie, or perhaps they were just pretending to. Asami and I couldn't see or hear them. Underneath the blanket, the two of us stared at one another in fright. We were so close together that we could have kissed, but we were too terrified to move, afraid of being caught. Finally, after what felt like an absolute eternity, the movie ended. The Vice President and his guest finally got up and left the cabin. Eventually, when we were confident the two men were gone, Asami and I scrambled out of the cabin and ran to find our friends. "And they never saw you? You guys must be like spies or something." Chelsea hung on our every word, bouncing on the balls of her feet with excitement. All of our companions were listening closely to our story. Princess Akano and Prince Akio looked worried, while Andy pulled a small notebook out of his pocket and scribbled down a few of the important details, looking not unlike his father as he did so. Asami had been pacing up and down the room as she retold the story. My little sister frequently moved out of her way. "So what do you guys think?" I asked. "We've got no idea what happened back there." Andy put down his pencil and looked over the notes he'd taken. "To me, it looks like you heard them making a backroom deal. My dad talks about them all the time whenever he's reporting on political news." "What's a backroom deal?" Jackie asked. "It's a nice way of saying it's a secret deal," Andy replied. "MacDonald doesn't want anybody to know about it." "Why not?" Akeno asked. "It's obvious," her brother said, folding his arms. "Your vice president knows that whatever he's trying to do will be either unpopular, illegal, or both. That's why it has to be secret. We've seen a few politicians back home get dragged down whenever their secrets get out." "All it takes is for one reporter to learn the truth," Andy chimed in. "Then the story spreads like wildfire, and it's not a secret anymore." Jackie seemed like she was struck by a sudden thought. "Hey, Andy, your dad's a reporter, right?" she asked. "How do reporters get those secrets in the first place?" Andy opened his mouth to reply, then paused. "Actually, now that I think about it," he said slowly, "I don't know." This led us down a different line of conversation, where we tried to guess how news reporters learned things the government tried to keep secret. Jackie suggested the government employees were simply blabbermouths. Chelsea thought that all news reporters were professional spies. I theorized that CNN might have bugged the Oval Office and were listening into government stuff. In the end, though, someone, I don't remember who, said we should simply call Andy's dad and ask. Andy pulled out his cell phone and dialed his dad's number. "Political news, Guerra speaking." Pete Guerra seemed to be one of those straight-to-the-point kind of people. Hey, Dad," Andy said cautiously. "My friends wanted to ask you a question." "Well, your friends better make it quick," Pete said curtly. "The press corps is on the move. Big, important vote in Congress tomorrow." Andy held out the phone to me. Feeling really nervous, I said, "How are you reporters always finding out secrets?" Pause. Then, when Pete spoke again, his demeanor did a complete 180-degree turn. He seemed much friendlier all of a sudden. "Well, I'll be. It's the first son himself. Look, kid, I'll tell you straight. Us journalists and reporters, we're kind of like detectives in a way, and our client is the people. Now, our clients, they only want one thing: the clear, unvarnished truth about what's going on. Now, I'll admit, we make things interesting by choosing our words a certain way. If we didn't, no one would read the news. Now, secrets, that's what people want the most, young man. The American people know their government is keeping secrets from them, so we search long and hard for them. And you know how we find out those secrets most of the time? No? Whistleblowers, kid. People who are actually inside the government, and they see something shady. They know something foul is going on, so they call the reporter and say, 'Hey, I just saw something that don't look right, and I want to tell you all about it.' That's a whistleblower, kid. So tell me." I could feel the excitement in Pete's voice. "You didn't just call to shoot the breeze or ask me how I do my job, kid," Pete said. "You were thinking about me because you saw something, didn't you? You saw or heard something that just felt off, or maybe wrong. Or maybe you don't understand it at all. Well, kid, I'm your detective, and I've got a whistle for you. You want the truth? You want to stop someone from doing something wrong? Or do you want both?" I looked up from the phone. Jackie, Akeno, Asami, Akio, Andy, and Chelsea had all been listening. In hindsight, we should have thought this over, discussed it as a group. But we were children. Impressionable children. Once Pete Guerra finished his pitch, we got that terrible feeling in our stomachs. The feeling that every child gets when they believe, rightly or not, that they are not allowed to say no to an adult. We thought we had no choice but to repeat our story to Pete Guerra. And that's what we did. Pete listened to Asami and I for half an hour, stopping us only to ask clarifying questions. As we neared the end of our retelling, Asami's voice cracked, and I finished the story for her. The phone was silent for a moment, making us think Pete had hung up on us. So, the vice president traded away something in return for something off-menu, Guerra said. Well, kid, I'm impressed. This might be the biggest scoop of the year. Wait, might be? I said. Is there a problem? There is, Pete said. You're all kids. I'm not allowed to use children as a source if the story could be controversial. I need an adult to confirm your story. Oh, we all said. Well, now it seems as though we'd wasted a phone call. Jackie and Asami both sat down on the couch and began to pout. Akio said something in Japanese that was almost certainly a curse word, and Andy, grasping at straws, grabbed the phone from me and said, But the only adults who saw it were MacDonald and the other guy. Isn't there anything you can do? Oh, there is. Don't you worry, Pete replied. Didn't I just say that journalists are like detectives? I'm gonna get to work. Put my nose to the ground. Find leads. Interview people. If you turn on the news and see the vice president's face above a breaking news banner, you'll know I've hit the jackpot.